Welcome to this afternoon's Executive Office Committee meeting. We will make a start and begin with apologies. At this stage, I have just an apology from Trevor Lunn that he'll be a little bit delayed in joining us, so he hopes to join us maybe a little bit later in the meeting. And then just for myself, I need to join another meeting at 3 o'clock, at which the Vice Chair is going to go to at 3:30, so we'll rotate the chairmanship of the meeting during it as well. Under Chairman's remarks then, just firstly, can I take an opportunity to welcome, we have two new committee members with us this afternoon. Can I welcome Padraig Delargy, who is replacing Martina Anderson on the committee. You're very welcome. And also to Alex Easton that has joined us online, who is replacing George Robinson. So Alex, you're very welcome onto the committee as well. We look forward to having some new members, some new blood and new perspectives on matters to join the rest of us in our work. And just if there's anything that either of you need, there's myself or Michael or any of the committee staff will do whatever we can to help with you and your role on the committee. And then just if I could also wish George Robinson well and thank him for his service on the committee and also on the predecessor committees for this committee, which was he was on the Office of First and Deputy First Minister Committee from 2009 to 2014 and then has been with ourselves from we came back last year. So I know that last week it was announced that he was moving committees and I wasn't here, but I just wanted to put on record my thanks to him for that work. Also, members, the Justice Committee has been engaged on the issue of the Troubles Permanent Disablement Scheme, and that is something that is shared between the Executive Office and the Department of Justice. Now, the division of responsibilities between the departments is to be provided to us as a committee, but in the meantime, the Committee for Justice is seeking an informal meeting with the Victims Payments Board in order to ensure that there's effective oversight of the process. So members will be aware that this has kind of been toing and froing as to who has the actual responsibility and the operational responsibility for this, and it would appear that within both departments they're quite determined that it's the other that has the responsibility for it in some respects. So I think what we'll do is we've written and asked for details on that, so while we're waiting on that information coming back, maybe if members are happy we will ask the Justice Committee that we would be happy to join them in a joint meeting with the Victims Payment Board, and we'll get that scheduled for some point. I think it's tentatively set in for the 6th of October at 10 o'clock, so we'll circulate the details of that meeting, and if any members are able to make it, we'll probably, as ever, not be too unhappy if all members can't make it, because if it's a joint committee and meeting another group, if there's 18 of us, that's a really big meeting. But certainly if we were able to maybe try and tackle ourselves around about half the committee, even getting along to that, it would be very useful to be able to meet with them. Then under Chairman's remarks, I have just two items that I want to raise. I want to raise what has followed really, I suppose, in the press yesterday and today over the issue of vaccine certificates. What we had yesterday was the Health Minister suggesting that this was something that was the responsibility of the Executive Office for them to bring forward that proposal. But we certainly know, and I know I listened this morning to Dr. Alan Stout, where he is saying, along with others within the profession, that they are facing a winter where there are going to be difficulties and there are going to be problems, and that we either are going to be looking at a lockdown of some form or the introduction of vaccine certificates to try and control measures if we don't get the number of transmissions down. They've been staying stubbornly over the 1,000 level every day for the last number of weeks. And we've seen the statistics as well about the numbers of people that are in ICU who are unvaccinated. And as we approach further into the winter period, our health service is going to be under considerable pressure. So what I'm suggesting is that if there is some concern within the various Executive Office ministries about whose responsibility it is, as an Executive Office committee, I'm suggesting that we write to the Executive Office ministers and ask whose responsibility it is and clarify that once and for all so that we know who it is that has that responsibility should it need to be taken forward. Are there any views on that from members? John?
Chair, just to come in the back of that, I would support that also. I think given the cross-cutting nature of such an implementation, it would inevitably lie, and I couldn't see how it wouldn't do with TO, but I think it would be very important to get that clarity from the First and Deputy First Minister as quickly as possible, given the eyes that are on this at the minute.
Okay, so members, are we happy enough just to send off and seek that clarification? Okay, and then
just briefly, I know John's absolutely certain there it's the responsibility of TEO, and I don't want. I'm not getting into an argument about this, but I just think it sounds to me more of an operational matter for health to make the preparations for what we're talking about. So I'm just adding that for the record.
Certainly, Pat, and I think, look, it's not an unreasonable view, but I suppose given that there doesn't seem to be a definitive message coming out, maybe our role as a committee is just to ask that question and seek that clarity, and then we will know going forward who has that responsibility. But yeah, I think it's easy to see how both sides could be saying it's one or the other, but maybe we can take the step forward and find out clearly and definitively who has that responsibility. The other issue that I wanted to raise was just another matter that was came to light today, which was from the Equality Commission, who have ruled that the Northern Ireland office breached its duties by not releasing an equality assessment document on how victims would be affected following the statements in March 2020, which laid the groundwork for the command paper in July 2021. I think as we had a debate in the chamber the other day, one of the things where there was consensus is that there are no parties in this assembly that are in support of the legacy suggestions, but to find out that the process may not have been followed correctly is obviously worrying. Nobody wants to see a bad scheme introduced, but nobody wants to see a scheme that hasn't been correctly implemented. And I was going to make the suggestion to the committee that we invite members from the Equality Commission to come up and give us a briefing on what they have found, so that we can make those representations to the Northern Ireland office on that issue of legacy, because we know that legacy can create a lot of division and a lot of problems within the Assembly, but I think we need to know that when procedures are being carried out that impact us, that they're being done properly and correctly. So would members be happy enough if we ask the Equality Commission to come up and give us a briefing on that? Okay, that's grand, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda then, I think I maybe jumped things around, then is the draft minutes, which are of the meeting that was held on the 22nd of September. They're on page 6 of the meeting pack. Are members content that they're a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting?
Happy.
Okay, we can get those signed and agreed then. Item 4 then, matters arising. At last week's meeting, Mrs Dodds, who's joined us there, raised the issue of subsidy control at Westminster and asked whether there was any research on its impact for Northern Ireland. Now, the clerk spoke with the Assembly Research and to the clerk of the Economy Committee, and the Committee for the Economy is aware of the implications of the subsidy control bill. The Research Service provided a Commons Library briefing paper, which is called Subsidy Control Bill 2021-22, and that's on pages 15 to 66 of the pack. Section 2.3 of the paper refers to the devolution issues and aspects of the bill, and Section 2.4 refers to the implication for the Northern Ireland Protocol. So that document is there. I'm sure members have had an opportunity to read through it. And really, I suppose there are questions possibly on how the divergence in legislation in Northern Ireland and GB might be tracked. What I'm going to suggest, unless there's any other alternative, is that given that we have the junior ministers coming up next, that if people had issues on that matter, that they might ask them of the junior ministers, who then could go back in their capacity within the Executive Office and seek the information as required. That might hold more weight than us as a committee maybe writing to departments in the UK government and asking for information. I'm going to initially seek direction from Diane, who I think I saw nodding there, so I'm hoping that's a positive look there, Diane.
No, that's absolutely fine. I just think that this is something to be aware of. The more divergence there is, and the more that Northern Ireland is stuck with EU rules, while our biggest market moves off to do other things, then the more difficulties there are for Northern Ireland firms. It stands to reason. So no, that's a fair way forward, Chair. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Diane. That's appreciated. And then that leads us quite nicely into then the section 5 of the agenda. I suppose maybe just to double check, does any other member have any matters arising from last week's meeting? Okay, then what we can do then is move to item 5 on the agenda, which is the UK exit from the European Union. It's an oral briefing from the junior ministers. There are some papers on pages 68 to 91 of the meeting pack, and available in the table pack as well. There are some information. So if we could have the junior ministers up into the spotlight, please, and welcome them to the meeting. And I can see that we have Junior Minister Kearney and Middleton. You're both very welcome to today's meeting. Good to see you again. Thank you for coming today to give us an update. We'll pass over to yourselves as ever to give us an update and report, and then we can open up some questions from members. So pass over to yourselves.
Tanona Mai, Colin, good to see you all this afternoon. I'll kick off, if you don't mind. Again, as always, we welcome the opportunity to update the Committee on EU Exit Matters. I'm going to start this afternoon by updating the Committee on developments in relation to the protocol since our last appearance in June, and then we'll provide an update on the Common Frameworks issue. As we outlined in the written update provided to the Committee, the British Government announced on the 6th of September that it would unilaterally extend the protocol grace periods which are currently in force. And while the European Commission did not agree to the extension and reserved its right in respect of infringement proceedings, it did state that it is not opening any new infringement proceedings for now. While we welcome this standstill, it does avoid a cliff edge for our businesses, and it does provide the time and the space, we hope, for permanent solutions to be found as the British Government and the EU continue with their discussions. As we also outlined in the written update since our last appearance on the 30th of June, the British Government and the EU have each published papers proposing solutions to some of the issues that are currently impacting on businesses. And our officials have been working with officials across the relevant departments to analyse the proposals contained in both the British Government's command paper and the EU's non-papers on medicines and various SPS issues. While we welcome the ongoing dialogue and the efforts being made on all sides to find solutions, the proposals in the non-papers and the command paper do not fully address the concerns of our citizens or our business community. Our businesses have called for certainty, simplicity and affordability. That means long-term workable solutions that create the least possible disruption to communities here. And it is essential that any proposed solutions meet those asks. Without certainty about future requirements, our businesses will be unable to plan ahead, which will impact on their investment and overall competitiveness, hinder their growth, and inevitably have a negative effect on the overall health of our economy as we try to recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses also need time to implement any agreed solutions. It's also essential that the complexity and the cross-cutting nature of the various issues is taken into account, as a potential solution that might work for one sector may have unintended consequences that would have a detrimental impact on another sector. And whilst this is not an agreed TEO position, Colin, I would suggest that an example of that is the British Government's proposal in the command paper to remove the medicines from the protocol. Now, that might solve the issues related to the supply of medicines, but it would also have a significant negative impact on our pharmaceutical industry due to the nature of their supply chains and customer base, which rely on continued access to both the British single market and also the EU single market. And similarly, officials in our Department of Health have advised that the EU non-paper does not outline the broad solution required to meet the needs of our industry and our patients. It lacks the flexibility to adapt to the way our medicine supply works and to ensure that there's equity of access with Britain to new treatments. So it's therefore important that there is enhanced engagement on the development of potential solutions with both the executive and our local businesses, so that we can ensure that both the EU and the British government are fully aware of all of the impacts and that any solutions proposed are going to work in practice for our community. You'll be aware that the European Commission Vice President Maroš Šefčovič visited here in early September, during which he met with local businesses, representatives of civic society, political party leaders, and the Joint First Minister Paul Givan and myself. And we welcomed Vice President Šefčovič coming over here and making the time to speak with our businesses, civic society and our political leaders. During our meeting with him, we clearly made the point about a need for enhanced engagement with a solutions focus, and we understand that business also clearly outlined that they want to be in the room when solutions are being discussed, rather than just being relied upon to continue to provide information on impacts. We will continue to make these points in our ongoing close engagement with both the European Union and the British government, including in meetings with David Frost. Since the publication of the command paper, official level meetings between the British government and the EU have been ongoing over the summer months to examine how future discussions on the points made in the command paper may take place. The Joint Consultative Working Group took a break in August, but it met again on the 14th of September. And that meeting focuses on functional aspects of information sharing between the British government and the EU. And the Executive Office was represented at an official level. Since July, information has been communicated by the EU through the Joint Consultative Working Group on a number of EU acts, which amend or replace legislation in the protocol. The Executive Office has been ensuring that the relevant departments are advised of those that fall either within their devolved responsibility or are reserved matters of interest to them. A meeting of the Specialised Committee took place on the 24th of September. This official level meeting was attended by Tom Reid, the Director of our EU Exit Team. The meeting covered progress being made on customs IT systems and exchanges of information between the British Government and the EU, as well as the Joint Consultative Working Group and plans for future joint stakeholder engagements. Turning to common frameworks, on the 8th of September, I attended a ministerial meeting with representatives of the British Government, the Scottish and the Welsh administrations to discuss progress on the development of common frameworks. It was a very helpful meeting with discussion on how to progress the frameworks, address the remaining cross-cutting issues, and ensure that all of our respective legislators are in a position to subject them to democratic scrutiny. We agreed to meet again with the aim of finalising a common position on the remaining cross-cutting issues as they affect common frameworks, the internal market and international relations. And that meeting will be arranged once we are aware of who is going to replace Chloe Smith in the Cabinet Office. In July, at a meeting of the Executive Committee dealing with EU exit matters, ministers noted a change to the clearance process for common frameworks. This removed the need for provisional confirmation by Joint Ministerial Council EN ministers in all four administrations and allows the frameworks to progress directly to scrutiny in the relevant Assembly Committee. The first cohort of common frameworks should reach the Infrastructure, Health and Economy Committees this week to begin scrutiny. We anticipate that the remainder of the frameworks will be submitted towards the end of October. And at that point, Colin, I'm going to hand over to Gary. Thank you.
Okay, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Declan, and thanks, Chair, for the introduction. I just want to take this opportunity to welcome Padraig and Alex to the committee as well, and obviously pay tribute to George Robinson for the work that he carried out in the committee over many years. I would like to just take this opportunity, firstly, to update the committee on work which is continuing across departments to address the residual withdrawal agreement issues related to the end of the transition period, before I then turn to the EU settlement scheme and the dedicated mechanism. So addressing the residual issues remains an ongoing and fluid process as the UK and EU continue to engage on a number of areas, including those which are subject to additional grace periods. Both ministers and officials have continued to take the opportunities available to them to ensure that the UK Government and the EU are both fully aware of the impact of the end of the transition period on our businesses and our citizens, but also to take the opportunity to emphasise the need for ongoing engagement with us. We have been clear in our representations to the Government that it is essential that we are represented in the governance structures of both the Trade Cooperation Agreement but also the Withdrawal Agreement, particularly where this falls within the devolved competence of this Assembly and the Northern Ireland Executive. Lord Frost has now set out the Government's approach in terms of the engagement with the TCA implementation. Whitehall departments will be primarily responsible for the detailed implementation of the Trade Cooperation Agreement within their policy areas. That means including the chairing of the relevant specialised committees and indeed engaging directly with their counterparts in each jurisdiction. Executive Ministers will attend the Partnership Council, which oversees the implementation and the operation of the TCA at a political level, where items of devolved competence are included on the agenda. While it is unlikely there will be an opportunity for our ministers to speak at the Partnership Council, a ministerial pre-meeting with Lord Frost will be convened prior to each meeting, just to enable our ministers to put forward their views on the position taken by the Government on each agenda item. The first meeting of the Partnership Council was indeed held on the 9th of June, and in preparation, the former First Minister and the Deputy First Minister attended a ministerial pre-meeting chaired by Lord Frost, in which there was an opportunity to put forward their views. The agenda for the Partnership Council included discussions on SPS and customs facilitation, fisheries, law enforcement, long-term visa fees, union programmes, and finally TCA governance structures. Articles 12 to 14 of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement provide for engagement with civic society, and Article 14 in particular provides that the parties shall facilitate the organisation of a civil society forum to conduct a dialogue on the implementation of Part 2 of the TCA. The consultation on how the Government should engage with business and civil society on the implementation of the TCA ran from the 9th of August 2021 to the 21st of September, having been extended by a week to accommodate receipt of responses. A total of 66 replies were received from businesses, charities and NGOs from across all four administrations, with the key theme emerging being the timing and frequency of meetings, along with how input from thematic focus groups with the appropriate level of knowledge expertise will be received. We will be happy, of course, to provide a further update to you and to the committee as more detail emerges from the consultation. The EU will also consult its stakeholders on the implementation of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. It opened a call for expressions of interest to participate in the EU Domestic Advisory Group. The deadline for applications was the 5th of July. There have been no further announcements regarding the formation of the group. However, the UK and EU Domestic Advisory Groups will meet annually in the Civil Society Forum. I will now finally and briefly turn to the EU settlement scheme. The committee will be aware that the European Union settlement scheme closed to new applications on the 30th of June. We are delighted that 99,830 applications were received by the deadline from EEA citizens wishing to continue living here. We recognise the valuable contribution they make not only to our economy but to culture and wider society. So we welcome that those citizens missing the deadline can make a late application, and that in doing so their rights to continue living here and working here are protected while while their application is being considered. We recognise that changes can be confusing for EEA citizens, employers and services alike. Therefore, it is essential that all EEA citizens living here can demonstrate their status easily when needed. The First and Deputy First Ministers, along with ministers from the Scottish and Welsh governments, wrote to Kevin Foster, Minister at the Home Office, to urgently urge him that the current digital-only proof of status be implemented and supplemented with a form of physical proof for those individuals who have difficulty with digital access. Officials continue to work closely with the Home Office and other devolved administrations and to support the work of advocacy agencies here, namely STEP and Advice NI, who continue to support our EEA citizens. Hopefully, Chair, that provides some helpful information in terms of an update. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both the junior ministers there for that update. And yeah, we'll move on then to questions. We have a number of members that are indicating that they would like to ask. Maybe if I could go first. I just want to start maybe with a very quick non-Brexit question, but one that I think we just would like to clarify, and it is the issue of the FICT report, because it's been rumbling on and on and on, and I know that we have written to you, that others have written, and I know in question time on a Monday that we got some guidance, but we still seem to be devoid of getting a date as to when this report will be published so that we can move to the next stage in it. And I think it's being built up as a super report on the basis of the mystery that surrounds the publication of it and progression of that. But are you in a position at all to tell us when that report would be published?
Well, I'm happy.
Colin. Yes, I outlined on the Assembly during questions on Monday a chronology of where we have been at in relation to the report. Suffice to say, I would have wanted to see this move forward much more quickly. We brought a report into the executive back in March and agreed a pathway for how we would proceed towards publication with appropriate scaffolding to ensure that there would be implementation of the 45 recommendations upon which there's consensus. And there have been difficulties ever since in trying to move to the point where we could come back into the executive. We were due to come back in at the end of April, beginning of May. That didn't happen. We then had further discussions moving in towards the summer. There was to have been another meeting of the working group on the 21st of September. That didn't happen. I don't know why, but as you'll appreciate, these are all joint meetings. But I spoke to the issue at the executive meeting on the 24th. I reiterated, as I've done on many occasions before, both within the executive as well as publicly, that it's essential that as an executive we embrace this report. We take advice from our officials in relation to what should be the next steps. I think they're very clear. They provide a systematic way forward. And there was agreement indicated in the executive that we should proceed to that point. And I have already asked now through the office that we would identify the date for the executive meeting where we can in fact have the dedicated discussion we agreed we would have back in March in order to ensure that we proceed. And to make the point, I don't think there's any great mystery in relation to this particular report. It has been well enough trailed. Every single party has a copy of the report because all of the 5 main parties were involved in the deliberations of the Commission. All ministers, I'm quite sure, have had access to and read the report informally through the offices of their own party. So there is no mystery in relation to what it is we're dealing with. I just think we need the political will to take the report, recognise that it's not a silver bullet, it's not going to provide all of the answers, but it certainly does provide a pathway to deal with some of the most contentious issues that we as a society continue to confront.
Chair, just briefly on that, Minister Kearney is quite correct in that this was raised at a recent executive meeting. The minutes may portray a slightly different version, but I suspect that what we do need to see is the report published in its raw format, in the format in which it was completed, and I expect that to happen in a standalone fashion in the very near future. I suspect that there may be another meeting of the FICT working group to bring together that detail and to provide a date to the wider executive. So hopefully we will see that in the very near future.
Okay, I mean, you know, I appreciate that it's neither of your individual, potentially your individual faults here, but this just isn't acceptable. If something that is not going to cause a major amount of concern, but may provide up to 45 recommendations, which may help provide some solutions, and the report was presented to the executive back in January, where there's been nearly 10 months to assess that. And even after today, we're still talking about maybe another working group meeting before it goes to an executive, before it potentially is published for the public to be able to see that. I think the term glacial comes to mind at the pace to actually be able to deliver this. And I don't think that's fair on the public. I think if they kind of, like everybody else, have come in behind and said that there was a process there, that this working group would get together, it was given the space to go off and explore the issues and to try and work on recommendations which would bring real solution to many people in many communities right across Northern Ireland. And for us for there just to be delay after delay after delay and promise after promise after promise, I would ask that you both do what you can within the Executive Office to get this published as quickly as possible so that people are able to move on with those recommendations and be able to try and get some resolution to some really big concerns within communities.
I think that's fair comment, Colin, but for the record, the slowness and the blockage does not rest with me. And I note from Gary's comments that he appears to be suggesting that there should be a simple publication of the report, which I agree with. But the previous DUP position in relation to progressing this matter much earlier into this year and before Gary came into office was that we would in fact take an orderly approach to publication of the report alongside next steps that would be sensibly worked out in conjunction with officials owned by the entire executive and then implemented by all of the ministers affected, because as you'll appreciate, there are cross-cutting issues relating here to dealing with these issues. So we need a cross-departmental approach. I see no difficulty in achieving any of that, but there does seem to be a difficulty in taking this forward in the way that we discussed back in March, that we proposed to bring into the executive in April, May, and that despite my best efforts, we have still not successfully managed to do. There's been nobody more proactive on this issue than myself. I can assure you that I will continue to be proactive. But to go back to an earlier conversation that one of the previous First Minister had at that executive back in March with myself, let's do this in a sensible way, and let's not do this in a fashion where it constitutes a free-for-all. So let's publish the report, let's bring forward the sensible scaffolding, the work that's been done by officials, and work has been done by officials, and it has been tabled with the working group. It appears as if there's some step back from engaging with those proposals within the working group. Perhaps that's the reason why the meeting didn't take place on the 21st of September. But I'm certainly up for getting this done soon, as quickly as possible, and actually ensuring that we have a pathway forward on all of these issues in wider society.
I think the internal machinations of the Executive Office will always continue to astound all of us at how things can be delayed and squabbled upon and take forever to be published. But let's hope that we can take both junior ministers at their word today that they're going to try and progress this as quickly as possible. If I could move... Yes, go ahead, Gary.
suggestion. I think that if we're on the same page, I am happy to suggest that the report be published within the next week. There's no issue on our side in terms of publishing the report. So I look forward, hopefully, in the very near future, for that report to be published. Thanks, Chair.
Does that extend, Gary? Does that extend, Gary, to the proposals that have been tabled and worked up by officials also?
Well, no, because that is not the position of the executive. The position of the executive is to release the report in its current format, and I think
the position of the executive, Gary, is that it has not been allowed to see the report that has been drafted by officials. That's the situation.
Ministers, it's not very.
Ministers, your side of the TEO.
Ministers, it's not very often that I have to call order on two ministers from the same department while they're presenting virtually to the committee. But if I could ask you maybe to have your conversations offline and just come back to this committee with a report and come back to the Assembly with the report that we've asked for. But you've both undertaken that you're going to do it. There's been one suggestion there that we'll have it by next week, so I look forward to welcoming it under Chairman's remarks next week. If I could move to the issue of the matter of Brexit, one of the biggest issues that we are dealing with at the moment is labour shortages, and obviously the impact that labour shortages are going to have on a whole range of industries, not least the agri-food industry. Maybe could I ask, ask Junior Minister Kearney if you could give us an update just on your understanding of the labour shortages and where we are and what work is being carried out by the Executive Office to deal with that. And maybe Junior Minister Middleton, you maybe want to tell us what it is that's actually causing the labour shortages?
Well, it's well documented that we are experiencing labour shortages, particularly in our food processing plants and specifically within the pork industry. It is interconnected with the ongoing impacts of the pandemic, but it's structurally linked to Brexit and the change in immigration rules that have been brought in by the Tories as a direct consequence of Brexit. What we're seeing here, I think, is not as severe as what's happening in Britain at this particular time, where there are very, very severe workforce shortages, not only in the haulage industry, but in hospitality and care homes and in other critical industries. And that is entirely bound up with the Brexit situation. So in some respects, I don't think that we have been hit with the worst effects of what's now being experienced in Britain because we have the mitigation of the protocol. And that really surfaces the question of ensuring that we have speedy, proportionate, flexible, pragmatic implementation of the protocol, because it clearly, in this instance, can give us the best potential for blunting the worst effects of Brexit in terms of how that's going to impact upon our economy. We always predicted that Brexit would have major repercussions in terms of our workforce, the resilience of our workforce, the maintenance of supply chains, and the overall ability of the economy to function. I think we're now starting to see that come through in Britain, and thankfully, I don't think we're seeing the worst effects of that hit here in the north, but I think the quicker that we get to implementation of the protocol, a resolution of the outstanding issues, then it will provide a protective field, I believe, against some of the severity of the situation that we're seeing in Britain at the moment.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose just in terms of your question to me, it does appear that there's a general tightness in the labour market with labour shortages in a number of sectors and firms having difficulty filling their vacancies. We are aware from various engagements that shortage of drivers in particular is having an impact on businesses, most notably resulting in supply chain disruption. I appreciate that it goes across a wide number of sectors, but it is also clear that these issues are not unique to Northern Ireland. With labour shortages being reported at UK level and beyond. And I take issue with the fact that it's in relation to the protocol. The COVID pandemic and the UK government immigration policy have impacted in terms of parts of our economy, and that has manifested itself, of course, in various forms, including particularly the issue in terms of what we see in our TV screens around HGV drivers. And impacts from this, of course, include signs of disruptions in supplies and increased costs for freight consumers as well. I'm happy to get into more specifics if in terms of the particular haulier issues, Chair, if you wish to do that. But otherwise, as I say, there are issues that as an executive and the Executive Office we're mindful of.
Okay, appreciate those responses, but I hope that it's not the approach of the Executive Office that in terms of the labour shortages, that as long as we're not as bad as GB, we'll be okay. I mean, there are many industries out there that are facing serious shortages. I mean, it's been reported that in some of the agri-food industry, that they're operating at 75% in terms of their workforce. And I mean, I think Brexit has got somewhat to play in that, because we have a reduction in the number of people that are here from an EU background. And I think it wouldn't be too difficult to highlight that Brexit has resulted in those people moving away from the north and back or off to various other parts of Europe. I mean, is that something that is recognised within the Executive Office and something that you're trying to remedy?
Well,
of course it's recognised. The reality is that we are facing workforce shortages, and structurally it is directly connected to the effects of changing immigration arrangements, which stem from the imposition of Brexit. There is, if this is helpful to the committee, the establishment now of the Interdepartmental Steering Group, which is the successor to the Senior Users Group, which was established originally at the outset of all of this under the Future Relations Programme Board relating to EU affairs. That's an interdepartmental coordination group which is responsible for constantly monitoring all of these issues and ensuring that we have a coordinated and joined up departmental response to the kind of issues that are now emerging as we deal with the existence of Brexit, but in the context of trying to ensure that we work through the remaining difficulties around the protocol and ensure then that we optimise the protections that the protocol will provide. So there is a structure in place. It's meeting on a regular basis. It has been repurposed in the course of recent weeks, but with a view to ensuring that it is adequately focused on the newly emerging pressures and difficulties, such as labour and workforce shortages that we're speaking about.
If I could just ask before you come in there, Gary, I appreciate the language that you're using there. It's very much future tense. Minister Kearney, has it actually, that interdepartmental working group, which is welcome, has it actually met to discuss the issues of labour shortages within various sectors and industries here in the north at the moment? Has that actually been the focus of an agenda item for that interdepartmental working group?
Well, I haven't looked at the relevant agenda of the committee, the group as it has spoken or convened recently. But given that it is made up of representatives of all of the relevant departments, including Department for Economy, I would expect that workforce shortages absolutely have been part of those discussions.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Gary, you were coming in there?
Just to add to that, these are cross-cutting issues. We very much rely on our ministerial colleagues, the Department for the Economy, indeed Infrastructure and others, to bring forward the issues as they see them within their departments. We have received particular updates around the pressures within the infrastructure department and the haulage sector, and indeed the Department for Economy has been keeping us up to date with their issues as well. But these are very much on the agenda. It's something that we keep a close eye on, a close monitoring on, and it's something that we work closely with industries on as well.
I certainly appreciate watching a problem, but I'd love to hear the solutions that we're actually providing for it, because that's what will make the difference for people. But maybe what we could do is we could write and ask for details of any discussions that there has been at that interdepartmental working group, just to get a flavour of that. My final issue before I pass over to the Deputy Chair, can I just ask about the Peace Plus programme? We obviously had this issue raised over the last week or two in terms of the sign-off that is required from the North-South Ministerial Council to be able to release that funding. Can I ask this in a very clear way? Does the North-South Ministerial Council have to meet to sign off for those hundreds of millions of pounds of finance to be made available to groups? I see that pretty much as a yes-no question or an answer.
Yes.
Gary?
My understanding may do. I understand that the next meeting of that or that issue is to come around December time. That's as far as I know. But I haven't been invited to such a meeting, so I don't know.
Okay, well, given that it involves upwards towards about £1 billion worth of investment, could I suggest that the Executive Office has a clearer understanding of that rather than yes on one side and maybe on the other? I think it's really important, and there's many groups, there's many people's jobs that are on the line as a result of that funding, and I think that they would appreciate something slightly more than a maybe. I think we need to be much more concrete than that.
Sorry, Colin, just to clarify and to be helpful to yourself, you asked for a clear answer. I provided you with a clear answer. The position is, and if you read the appropriate documentation, you'll find that there's a requirement that the NSMC is involved in the sign-off to ensure the release of the 1.1 billion of euros which constitutes Peace Plus. So I don't think I can be much more clear than that, and would appreciate if you would acknowledge the clarity of that particular position.
I both acknowledge it and suggest that you provide the same document to your colleague and partner there who seems to have a different interpretation in that. Thank you, gentlemen, for answers to my questions. I'm going to pass you now to the Vice Chair, who I'm also going to ask just to take over the meeting at this stage as well, just to allow it to slide through for the next section.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Junior Ministers, thanks very much for coming along today. We appreciate the update and certainly the breakdown of the ongoing process between the EU and the UK Government in terms of the protocol and the ongoing negotiations in the back of the command paper, etc. Just in terms of my first question, Junior Minister Middleton, you referred to the ongoing role that executive ministers are playing in meetings, feeding into that process. Can I just get clarity? Will executive ministers or junior ministers continue to attend the specialist committee on implementation of the protocol as part of the joint committee? It broke up a bit when you were talking about that, so I wasn't quite sure.
Yes, what we do in terms of the joint committee, the last meeting of the joint committee took place on the 9th of June. Since that meeting, the UK Government had published their command paper. That meeting was attended by the then First and Deputy First Ministers, so ultimately it'll be for the First Minister. What I would say on that, just to give a bit of clarity, John, is that where we can have an input in terms of the negotiations, then we will absolutely attend and make the case. That is, I suppose, a different position to where the North-South relationships appear to exist. The Joint Committee and Specialised Committee are different because we will use every opportunity to raise the concerns of Northern Ireland and their businesses.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Middleton. Junior Minister Kearney, is there anything you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, just to clarify, John, officials attend the specialised committees. There are 19 of them. Officials also attend the Joint Consultative Working Group. The First Ministers and Junior Ministers have in the past attended the Joint Committee, and we have a right to address the Joint Committee as part of the respective delegations. However, in relation to the overall Partnership Council, the first meeting of which occurred on the 9th of June, while we did a pre-meeting with David Frost and colleagues from Wales and Scotland in advance of the Partnership Council, we were advised that we would have the ability to observe but not to speak at the Partnership Council. That's something that clearly we're not content about. It's also a position shared by our Welsh and our Scottish colleagues. So we will take every opportunity to represent the interests of our own democratic institutions here and the people that we represent. We will do our best to influence the nature and the direction of the discussions that take place. But from our perspective, the lead in any of these negotiations is always maintained by the British government. And we are not given an opportunity to substantively or meaningfully input to the negotiations, much as Gary and myself, the two First Ministers, would prefer otherwise. But we take every opportunity when the opportunity arises, both through JMC and then through the Joint Committee, and with our officials attending the Joint Consultative Working Group and the specialised committees, to ensure that our issues are clearly heard and understood. I hope that's helpful, John.
It is, yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It leads me on nicely. You referred to the democratic institutions here. I'm keen to get a flavour for how the Executive Office, or what you're doing about the EU legislation that Northern Ireland would potentially have to follow if via the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's been 9 months now since that was laid out. I'm just curious, is there an idea coming through TO about how many pieces of legislation they are expecting and when you're likely to inform committees in the Assembly about what the impact of this might be?
Yeah, John, I suppose this is the frustration when you're sort of half in, half out within the European Union and the difficulties that we particularly face in Northern Ireland. In terms of the legislation piece, the latest monitoring returns that just from the 13th of September indicate in terms of the Westminster bills, there's the Environment Bill, which was a supplementary legislative consent motion was agreed by the Executive on the 9th of September. There's the Professional Qualifications Bill, which is at committee stage in the House of Lords. It was completed at committee stage, apologies, on the 22nd of June. And then there's the Subsidy Control Bill, and I know that Diane had raised that earlier on in the meeting, which is currently in progress as well. 44 statutory rules have been identified as part and as required in the post-transition period. 34 statutory instruments that cut across devolved matters have also been identified as required post-transition period, but none of this legislation, of course, sits with the TEO. But what I would say in terms of there is a real issue with the democratic deficit in relation to having our views heard, certainly within the EU, in terms of what policies they will have and what impact they will have in Northern Ireland. So it's something that very much concerns us and something which we raise continually with the UK government, of course, who represents us in all of the negotiations.
Okay, thank you for that. I totally agree, by the way. I'm sure everyone does on that democratic deficit, whether it's via the Northern Ireland Protocol itself or via the feed-in process. I think it's lamentable that you can be told you have a seat at the table, but you have no active role to play a constructive role in that. And let's just hope that something can change in that. My final point is around state aid rules. Is there anything coming forward? I've yet to date seen nothing relating to the new state aid rules. And is the Executive Office envisaging an early testing of our legal position through the European Court of Justice, potentially?
I'm unaware of any intention to take forward legal action on that particular matter. John, unless that has been something which officials have discussed, they haven't brought it to our attention at this particular point in time.
Okay. No problem. That's all from me now. I'm conscious of your time as well, Junior Ministers. I have three other members to come in. Pat Sheehan, first of all, who's on Starleaf. Can we bring Pat in, please? Pat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thanks to the junior ministers. We've heard a lot recently in the media, I suppose leaks to the media, that the British government intends triggering Article 16. And of course, we know that they did unilaterally extend the grace periods. In contrast, Maurice Šefčovič was at the committee early in the summer, and of course he visited here at the start of September and met the parties. And there seems to be an attitude much more of trying to focus on solutions. And that seems to be the position of the EU Commission. And specifically, there have been areas mentioned, such as medicines and finding a solution to that issue, and the issue of SPS checks. And I'm just wondering, can the ministers give us an assessment of how they see the approach to the approach of the European Commission, given that certainly the public face of it anyway seems to be focused on solution finding? Gormagat.
Well, thanks, Pat, for that, and thanks, Chair. There's certainly a difference in approach. I know that the recent command paper issued by the UK government was certainly a step in the right direction, albeit not far enough. Pat, you do touch on the issue around medicines, which is of particular concern, not only to me, but primarily to the Health Minister and to his health officials. That's an issue which needs to be resolved. The command paper, of course, doesn't go far enough in dealing with those issues. The EU non-paper, and I'm told that there will be additional proposals from the EU coming mid-October, that will be welcome. Will it go far enough? Well, time will tell. I, for one, welcome engagement. So whether it be Mara Sefcovic or whether it be Lord Frost, I want them to speak to real people here in Northern Ireland. I want them to speak to businesses, and I want them to speak to people who are affected by what's happening at this minute in time. But when I meet, and Junior Minister Kearney and I have met a number of representatives from the Danish embassy, for example, people from Germany. Many of them tell us that these are, technical issues which can be resolved. The difficulty being is that if they were, if they are so easily resolved, then we need to see solutions. And I think that, when we talk about Article 16 being triggered and the language around that, and the fact that the EU did trigger Article 16, which of course created an issue for us in Northern Ireland. I want to see both sides work together. I want to see both sides come to a solution. We're not asking for anybody to do anything that they haven't already agreed to. We all come into the executive on the basis of New Decade, New Approach. We all committed to unfettered access, East-West, and indeed the importance as well of our relationships North-South. But I'm in solution mode. I know that hopefully everybody around the executive table are in solution mode, but we need the UK and the EU to get around the table and address the very serious issues, economic issues, but also constitutional issues as well.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. And I'll just come in on this briefly, John. The meetings that we had with Mara Šefčovič back on the 8th and 9th of September, I thought were very significant. And we had an opportunity to listen to his thoughts on what could be done to try and address particularly the priorities of medicines and also SPS checks. And as they relate to both trade on an east-west, west-east basis, we're absolutely united that we need to see a frictionless arrangement, east-west, west-east. I don't want to see any borders damaging our ability to flourish or prosper as a society. To go back to the point about democratic deficit, one of the difficulties is that we can express and represent our concerns about the absolute need to provide certainty and simplicity and stability for our businesses here to secure jobs and attract further investment. But we are not in a position to influence the negotiation strategy being taken forward by the British government. That is a democratic deficit. As Gary and I said together to representatives of the Danish embassy in London yesterday, we would much prefer to be representing the interests of our own people, and to be doing that in a very coordinated, joined up, effective way. But we're not on the negotiation driving seat here. So when we hear commentary around a willingness or an intent to trigger Article 16, and David Frost has said, in his view, he has the conditions and circumstances to do so, but chooses not to trigger Article 16 at this particular point in time. That alarms me, because I think what we need at this time is a solution-focused approach to dealing with these particular issues. To drop the inflammatory language, most definitely to drop the dishonesty around how many of these issues are being highlighted and used, I think, to create smokescreens. Because increasingly it appears to me the driving agenda on behalf of some sections of Whitehall, not perhaps all, is a very narrow approach towards sovereignty and a standoff with the European Commission and the European Union on sovereignty issues. And as a result then, this region and our economic and societal well-being has to absorb the repercussions of all of that instability, and a failure to close out issues that I believe can be very, very quickly resolved. Well, certainly they can be resolved. We need to agree timelines for their resolution. But Maroš Šefčovič has said they are prepared to change significant sections of European legislation in order to find solutions to the matters of medicines. There are clear solutions, landing zones available for how we deal with SPS. They've been tried and tested in other places. So the only point of difference between myself and Gary in relation to the need to find resolution on all of these issues is I believe that we have to extract the emphasis on constitutional issues. I think that that's a rabbit hole. I think that it creates further difficulties, unnecessary. And to concentrate on the common sense solutions that I believe can be found. And it is for the British government and the European Commission to find those resolutions and find those technical solutions. I would urge them both to double down to do that, to do it in a timely way, and then allow us to move on to ensure that our businesses and our society overall has the best opportunity to exploit access to the dual market opportunities of both continued involvement within the British single market and also the European single market as well. There are very few other places in the world that are potentially poised to be able to maximise those kind of benefits. If we can clear up these other issues, close them out, then I think that puts us in a very good position to be in.
Okay, thanks for that. And just very briefly, Chair, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Gary, and I know you said there in your answer to me that you're in solution mode. And I don't doubt you when you say that, but how do you reconcile that with the threat of your own party to pull down the institutions and phrases like, it's the protocol or the institutions, you can't have both?
Well, that implies the issue, Pat, because it is a constitutional issue, because where Northern Ireland is separated from the rest of the United Kingdom, that's a major constitutional issue for myself as a unionist, but of course, but it also then affects the economic position of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom. What we have said, and our leader has been quite clear in terms of his comments around, we want Northern Ireland to work. In order for that to work, in order for the agreements to work, you need to ensure that where north-south arrangements are working, we need to ensure the east-west arrangements are also working. So what I would encourage you and all of the colleagues around the executive is to get on board with us and sing off the same hymn sheet when it comes to unfettered access east-west. That's all that we're asking for. We all committed to it. But for some reason, people are content and dragging their heels. I hope it isn't. I hope it isn't for political reasons. That's why I say we're in solution mode. We want Northern Ireland to work. The only way that's going to succeed is if we can get it to a situation where the barrier east-west is removed.
And you don't think Brexit is responsible for all of this, and the fact that your own party pushed for a hard Brexit, you don't accept any responsibility for that?
Well, the responsibility of the border and the Irish Sea lies with those who supported and championed the protocol. I do note and I welcome the fact that many of those who championed it and called for its rigorous implementation have now ruled back. There's now an acknowledgement there are issues, and I think that's positive actually in terms of a step forward as a recognition that there's a problem. But that's not enough. We need solutions. We need to. So when it comes to residents within your area going over to England with their pet, for example, but not being able to bring that pet back. Now, that's a ludicrous position. Thankfully, steps have been taken to push the can down the road and ensure the checks are not happening at this minute in time. That's not a sustainable position. This doesn't have to be a unionist nationalist issue. We can work collectively, but we need to work collectively to withdraw where the issues lie, and that's east-west at this minute in time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pat. I've got 3 more speakers at this stage. Alex Easton, I think you'd indicated, and then possibly put your hand down. Are you wanting to come in?
Yeah, yeah, it's me, yeah.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Sort of my first question is to both ministers. As far as I'm concerned, there's no point in sort of trying to nitpick or try and make small amendments to try and fix the protocol. As far as I'm concerned, it's not working and it's not going to work and it has to go. So my first question is to both ministers. Would both ministers accept that the Northern Ireland Protocol has damaged the institutions, has damaged relationships and damaged businesses right across Northern Ireland?
John, maybe I'll come in first, and thanks, Alex, for the question. And I completely agree with everything that you've said, particularly of the relationships within the institutions. And it is unfortunate that people don't see the real damage that's been caused. We know that not one unionist representative supports the protocol, supports the position taken by the European Union. And I think that that's something that should alarm all of us. We've seen David Trimble come out very strongly in terms of the effect that this particular arrangement had and has on the Good Friday Agreement. These are issues that we would expect if it's the other way around, that people would be sitting up and listening and saying, well, this is a major issue. Unfortunately, there seems to have been a burying the head in the sand type of exercise where nobody wanted to listen to the genuine concerns. But it has had a severe impact, as you will know, on the institutions. We can resolve that by removing the Northern Ireland Protocol, coming up with other solutions, whether that be around mutual enforcement and working with our counterparts in the EU to come to more frictionless arrangements. But the current situation is not something that unionists will tolerate, but the economic damage that it's doing. And we see it day and daily with simple things, whether it be Marks and Spencer's not being able to get their product lines onto the supermarket shelves, or whether it be the issue around pets, or a more serious life-threatening issue around medicines. So I completely agree with you. It's not about tinkering around the edges or making tweaks or kicking the can down the road with additional grace periods. We need long-term solutions, and the window is starting to run out in order for those solutions to come forward.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Welcome to the committee.
Well, it seems to be quite exciting so far.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. I have a different view. I think that we have a protocol now because of Brexit, and the protocol needs to be worked as a mechanism to blunt the worst effects of Brexit. I think it's entirely wrong to conflate the issues around the Brexit, around the protocol that we need to see resolved with political and constitutional issues. The reality is that we're having to navigate new trading circumstances that have come about as a result of Brexit and the existence of the protocol. I think it's a huge mistake and a great disservice to us all to see how the protocol has been seized on for what I believe is selfish electoral reasons at this particular time. In terms of damage to the institutions, no, I don't believe that there is damage to the political institutions. But where there is division in this society, then it's never good for politics, it's not good for the political process, and that puts pressure inevitably on our political institutions. The key here is that those who have been most inflammatory for entirely disingenuous reasons around the issue of the protocol, they need to step back from the brink. What we need to do is ensure a proper, proportionate, pragmatic implementation of the protocol to ensure that we face no worst excesses arising from Brexit, and we need to maintain power sharing.
Declan, I know you have a different view to me, and that's what you're entitled to, but surely you would accept that the protocol has caused damage to businesses in Northern Ireland. You would accept that. And I know there needs to be things done to fix that, but you would accept there is damage to businesses.
I recognise that there are a number of businesses that are experiencing disruptions at this time. The flip side, however, of that, and that's why we have to have an honest discussion around this, Alex. If you consider the first 6 months of this year, trade from north to south was raised by 77%. And in May alone of 2021, cross-border trade north to south, south to north, was worth in the region of €612 million. So a number of businesses are already in the process of adapting to the new trading realities and also to the real potentials that can open up arising from the protocol and the special position that it confers on the North by giving us a unique access to the British single market and the European single market also. What I want to see are those disruptions resolved. I think that there are ways of doing that if the political willingness is displayed by both the British government and the European Commission, and then allow us to actually maximise the opportunities that can be developed on the other side of having the kind of frictionless and unfettered ability to trade, both north, south, east, west, west, east, and then ensuring that this region can access the best of both commercial and trading worlds.
Yeah, my next question, whoever wants to answer it, I'm happy or both of you. Declan, you quoted some figures there, but I don't know if Gary would maybe have figures or not, but could you tell me what the extra cost has been to businesses in Northern Ireland with all the bureaucracy and all the tape work that's been added? And could you also tell me if there's been a reduction in trade and by how much between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK?
Alex, I don't have the particular figures to hand in terms of the cost. I know that it is significant, and I know that there was a report done by an economist in the Ulster University in terms of the impact that it would have. It seems it was in around £850 million in terms of per annum, and that's loss, that's business loss, not the cost. Not the cost that it was to like the likes of the Department for Agriculture, for example, and their experience at the ports. This is in relation to businesses that was carried out by an economist in the Ulster University. What I would say is that those costs are significant, and of course that the amount of businesses that rely on the supply chains from England, Scotland, and Wales are significant. An example, even on the ground was like accessing local cricket clubs accessing cricket soil. They weren't able to. There's a specialist company that does it in England. Weren't able to bring that into Northern Ireland. So there's a there at a micro level, but at an overall level, the figure was in around £850 million per annum, which is significant, and it's something that we can't tolerate and we need to see addressed.
So basically, it's okay to lose trade between east and west. Some people are saying, but it's okay for the trade to go north and south. That's not sustainable, and it's not very good, and it's not a very good attitude. It's okay if we take your business and bring it down south, but you're not allowed to have it the other way to the rest of the UK. So I find that very difficult to accept, I have to say. And just finally, you mentioned earlier about 44 statutory rules, I think, might be coming. Is that to come to the Northern Ireland Assembly? And excuse my dog, I think he's protesting against the protocol, by the way. But I think those 44 statutory rules, will they come to the Assembly for a vote? And do you know that, Gary or Declan, if that's the case?
Yeah, Gary, I think summed up earlier on quite accurately what we're looking at in terms of statutory rules, statutory instruments, and also, as I touched on, the common frameworks that are now coming directly to the scrutiny committees. We had a shortfall, I think, of something like 27, which were due to come back here to committee. That had been held up. That congestion's now been lifted, and 26, I think, of those 27 common frameworks are now going to arrive in committee, starting with effect from next week.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. That's me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, and you're very welcome to the committee, as is your dog, and we look forward to your contribution going forward. Two more speakers, junior ministers, and you'll be glad to know that she finished for now. I call in Emma Sheeran.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to the ministers for the question and answers thus far. I have a question or scenario that follows on from Colin's earlier remarks around the protections that have been granted to us by the protocol. I have a sister teaching in just outside Liverpool in England, and she's currently on a quarter tank of petrol. She is at the minute making arrangements to stay with a friend near the school that she's working in because she's not going to have any means of travelling from her home near the city of Liverpool out to the school in Widnes that she's working in. And that's not a problem that I have heard from anyone in the north of Ireland, because we obviously aren't experiencing the shortages here that are being experienced across the water in Britain at the minute as a result of Brexit in Britain, and as a result of the protections offered to us by the protocol here in the north. And obviously there are more examples than just that, but we do have some issues here as a result of Brexit. I know that in my own constituency we have a number of food processing plants that are experiencing issues because of a loss of workforce and people that previously were working in some of our factories from EU countries that have returned home because of Brexit and the different implications of that in terms of the EUSS and the problems that they had faced, or the fear that existed around that, and that's having real implications for businesses. Obviously, the protocol has offered protections to other types of food producers. There has been a brilliant showing in livestock trade, and I know that people selling beasts are not having problems because of the protocol and the fact that that there's a smaller chain for them to work out of. So I know that Marks and Spencer's was mentioned there, and obviously we've seen in the news this past couple of days that they're planning to close, I think it's 11 shops in France because of problems with Brexit. So I just wanted your thoughts on that and the particular protections that we've been offered by the protocol and how we're going to mitigate against those particular issues around the loss of workforce. I know the Agri Minister had suggested last week that we should have some sort of divergence from British immigration law, which obviously we haven't been entitled to thus far, to allow us to get those migrant workers back.
Thanks, Emma. I maybe come in briefly and then Declan no doubt can come in after that. It's just in relation to the comments around the protocol. The protocol doesn't protect us one bit in terms of the fuel provision in Northern Ireland. My understanding in terms of the GB position and the position in England is that there are ample fuel stocks and that there was a situation of panic buying. But of course there are particular issues around haulage drivers, but thankfully in Northern Ireland we have been reassured that there's no issue in terms of our fuel supply or indeed any issues around shortages.
Minister, just to clarify there, so, I mean, and I'm putting that across in jovial terms, but that is the reality. I've got a sister working in England at the minute, and that is her situation at this minute in time. And there mightn't be a shortage of fuel, but as you've pointed out, there's a shortage of haulage workers, and that is as a result of Brexit. So I think it's important that that's clarified. And I know that you supported Brexit, but these are the real life implications for people.
Well, they are, but again, the issue around the drivers is not a Brexit related issue. We have issues around drivers right across the United Kingdom. There are solutions that we can look at, and hopefully the Department for Infrastructure will address some of the issues around licensing and testing as well. Those issues can be overcome, but to say that those are protocol-related issues is just unfortunately not true. And in terms of the issue around workforce, I take your point around the workforce issues, and I know that the Agriculture Minister has made some suggestions. Minister Kearney and I regularly attend meetings across the United Kingdom in terms of with other devolved administrations, and it's something that we very much have raised and will continue to raise. That's not recognising, but to blame everything on almost as if the protocol protects us, it's just not true.
Just a brief rejoinder then on that particular point. Grant Thornton has produced a report, that's the accountancy firm, recently, which concluded that somewhere in the region of 1 million vacancies existed in Britain, and half of those are within the food and the drink sectors, which over the last 20 to 30 years have relied very heavily, disproportionately upon an EU workforce. Industry bosses in Britain are saying, and it's reflected in the Grant Thornton report, that it is the cliff edge caused by Brexit, with a lack of British workers filling those gaps in the haulage industry, warehousing, hospitality and meat production and so on. And interestingly, something in the region of 1.3 million foreign-born workers who were previously employed in Britain have left and are yet to return. So it's a matter of fact that Brexit alone has made it hard for British-based haulage firms to hire drivers for the continent, from the continent. It is a structural consequence of Brexit, and from the very outset, I said back in 2015 and early 2016 that the imposition of Brexit would not just be bad for workers, businesses and their families here in the north and the island of Ireland. I predicted that it would have very, very significant adverse consequences for England, Scotland and Wales. And I think the scenes that we're seeing over the last fortnight, the chaotic scenes, quite calamitous scenes, are direct consequences of Brexit. I think it's a tragedy that that's the case. But it's as a result of the wrong policy decisions being made by the Tory government and the mess that they've got us all into. And I include all of us in that respect. Every single party within this Assembly and within our executive is now having to manage the consequences and repercussions of a huge calamitous mistake that was made back in June 2016. And we're living with the consequences of it. And we're seeing the worst effects of it play out at this point in time in Britain. Probably as we move increasingly away from the restrictions that we've had to live with under COVID. I think COVID to some extent has masked some of these underlying and structural difficulties. But these are the challenges now that we need to double down and address.
Emma, you come back in. I can't see if you're speaking or not there.
Thank you. I would obviously agree with the comments laterally made, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Last speaker is Patrick Delargay. Very welcome, Patrick.
So I know it's already been touched on, but I wanted to come back to the issue of the Peace Plus funding. It's a massive amount of funding, £1 billion, and my concern would be that if there is a DUP boycott, that would be at risk. That funding I've seen play out in Derry and in border regions in particular, in transforming communities, social services and SMEs, but across the north. And what I wanted to ask the ministers was, can they provide any clarity around how secure that funding is at the minute and what impact they believe that a DUP boycott would have on the security of that funding?
Well, the funding is in place at the moment, and it's a very significant amount of cash. It's 1.1 billion euros. So at this point in time, we are due Peace Plus, but it is dependent upon the necessary institutional mechanisms signing off to ensure that it's released. As we sit here at the moment, the NSMC is continuing to function in all of its aspects. I hope that continues to be the case. I hope that we continue to meet in sectoral and in plenary formats. And if the NSMC and the North-South institutions continue to function effectively, then yes, we'll be able to trigger and clear the release of the Peace Plus funding.
Thanks, Patrick, for your question. And unfortunately, the chair who had to leave didn't allow me to come back in terms of the response, because what I did want to update him on was the fact that obviously I recognise, like you, the value of these types of programmes. And the latest update we had received as of today was that the finance officials were currently meeting across all of the departments over the next couple of weeks to discuss the draft cooperation programme document, and just to ensure that each department's policy position is reflected in terms of the content and the proposed budget allocations of the programme. Once that has been completed, it will then require approval from the executive. That, of course, will be required in terms of the Irish government and the EU Commission as well. It was hoped that would be approved with completion, and calls for proposals in the early point of next year. That's the schedule that we're working to. So when I referred to possibly the December period, that's why I mentioned what I did. This is something that we are supportive of. We are not in the business of collapsing the institutions. If we are left with no choice, if people feel that they're willing to sacrifice the devolved settlement over ensuring that the protocol remains, then that's a choice for them. We want to make Northern Ireland work, and we want to see these funds delivered to our communities, no least, of course, the Foyle constituency.
Thanks for your responses.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Junior Minister, just before you go, Alex Easton has his hand up again. Alex, is that still up from last time, or are you wanting to come back in?
No, that was up from last time. Sorry about that.
No problem at all.
John, if I can come in briefly, it was remiss of me before I responded to Patrick's question not to welcome him also to the committee.
Thank you for that, Minister Kearney. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. You've given us a good chunk of your day, and thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate it. All the best,
everyone.
Bye-bye. Okay, moving on. The chair isn't back yet. He's 4 minutes late for my I think I've got that anyway, Michael. So moving on, members, unless anybody wants to come in just on anything that was discussed there, are we happy to move on to the next item of business? Yep. Is the scrutiny of arm's length bodies, the Equality Commission written briefing. It's in your papers under pages 93 to 102. And I just need to remind the committee that it was agreed that we invite written briefings from arm's length bodies in lieu of oral briefings. So just looking at that, members, is there anything anyone wants to raise today? Or are we happy to note?
Chair.
Emma.
I just noticed in the pack it makes reference to the fact that funding has been significantly cut. I think something like nearly 30%, 27% since 2008, 2009. And I know this was even in terms of the dedicated mechanisms, some of the conversations that we've been having in earlier briefings at the beginning of the year around funding levels and the fact that there had been a reduction in funding, and obviously going forward as we come out of COVID times and as we feel the real implications of Brexit in the north, probably going to be sort of increased demand on these services. So I think it's just something that's worth raising or noting at the very least.
Okay. Yeah, we've got that on the record, Emma. Thank you for that. Anybody else, anything to comment? Nope. Moving on then is the forward work programme. And just to advise members that the clerk will be scheduling an evidence session on the travel agents coronavirus financial assistance scheme in November. A list of potential stakeholders will be provided for members to approve next week. If you're happy enough then, are you happy to note the rest of the forward work programme?
Content, Chair.
Good stuff. Thumbs up, everyone. Good. Correspondence then under item 8. There are 6 items of correspondence in the meeting pack. And correspondence from the Committee for Finance at page 183 to 188 of the pack, which draws attention to a response from the Executive Office that the committee stating it has no role in the allocation of unique circumstances funding. I also need to refer you to the response from the Secretary of State at page 188, which states on the 21st of December 2020, the Secretary of State wrote to the First and Deputy First Minister to finalise the breakdown of the unique circumstances funding. This was officially agreed between the Secretary of State, the First Minister and Deputy First Minister at a meeting on the 25th of January 2021. They just want to suggest, members, that the committee writes to the First and Deputy First Minister to request a breakdown of the unique circumstance funding as indicated in the letter from the Secretary of State. Are we happy that we do that? No objection?
Yes, Chair.
Happy enough? Excellent. And are you happy to note the rest of the correspondence, members? Is there anything anyone wants to dive into? Nope. Okay. Item 9 is any other business. I have none. Michael, do you have anything for us?
I don't.
Open up the floor. Anybody got anything? Everyone's in best behaviour today. It's great. Item 10 then is the date and time of the next meeting, and that is next Wednesday, the 6th of October at 2 p.m. in here. That concludes the meeting. Thanks very much, members, for your attendance, and we'll see you next week, if not before.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.